said this countless times that the fly rod takes us to some beautiful places, and knowing where to start and what to start with before I ever leave Tennessee would be about as much help as anything. And even though I go out west more than some folks, a starting point on a particular river still would be helpful considering the time of year, where I'm going to be, and what I'm going to be fishing for. So, Michael, what's a good rig to start with when I get to where I'm going? Just a general rig in the Rocky Mountain West.
Well, David, it's a bit of a loaded question, but I think we can dial it in based on, a number of different things. Specifically, kind of, you mentioned what time of year it is, where you're going. I think one thing to look at in a normal year is, what's the river doing? And that's a pretty easy thing you can find out before you leave home and figure out if the water's high, if we're in runoff or post runoff, or if you're in kind of middle of summer conditions where we're kind of at that normal water level, or if we're late summer, maybe fall, lower level, lower water levels. And I think that's a good place to start. And maybe that's kind of how we go about breaking that down. And then also, we can dive in even deeper on, what you want to fish. If you want to fish streamers, you want to fish nymphs, you want to fish dry flies, and time of year dictates what's going to be best there as well. So, kind of breaking it down, if you're going, typically would be, spring or late spring, early summer, during high water. A lot of people get afraid to fish during that high water in the West because they think big snow, big runoff. But fish are still there. They're still eating. You might have to stand back 10 feet from where you normally stand because you're standing in, in the banks, but and fishing those inside bends and things like that. The rig I'd kind of start with if I'm going out, say I got a trip and I'm going to be out in the West in May or early June, and we know water level's not too like it's the clarity's okay. I typically start, think you got to get down quick. So we're thinking, big, heavy, maybe I always stick with like a pass of rubber legs on top if I'm nymphing, and that's a good fly to get down quickly. And it's a big bug, can imitate a bunch of different things. And then, there's still some things hatching. So whether you go for a big pheasant tail or something on that side got a little flash to it that, they can see in that bit of turbidity and off color, or you can go with the always loved sandworm worm or something like that. There's a lot of worms moving around if people want to go that route. And then I like throwing, that time of year high water, I like throwing streamers on the inside banks. I don't think you can ever go wrong with my favorites, the Dalai Lama. You go as big as you can and throw the Dalai Lama out there. That the white and olive is my favorite color. It's got a little flash to it. And those fish are laying there, and if you can get that drift just right, they're looking for an easy meal and a big meal at that time of year. And then I always look at, normal water. I kind of rule out dry fly fishing during runoff, so we'll skip that one. But you go normal water, middle of summer. In the West, we have kind of, depending on where you are, pretty dominant hatches across most of the watersheds. But you look at your mayflies or your caddis hatch or stoneflies, things like that. Um, my favorite rig is to go some sort of beaded nymph if I'm going to nymph. A pheasant tail is hard to beat. Flashback pheasant tail or soft tackle pheasant tail. Something gives you some motion and a little bit of, really you're looking at your depth in your water and where those fish are sitting. So that's kind of something to figure out. But a pheasant tail and then some sort of emerger. Bars emerger on the back is hard to beat. RS2, something smaller. So you kind of cover those two, a bigger hatch or a bigger bug, a bigger mayfly species, and then you got something smaller that's moving on the back end of that. Always got to put a dry dropper rig together in that middle of the summer, or even a hopper dropper rig. The hoppers get started earlier than you think. If you're out there in July, I know that it's hard to beat, throwing a big chubby Chernobyl and just having a pheasant tail or hare's ear. Guide's choice hare's ear is always a go-to underneath that. And then streamers, you can still get away with it in the middle of summer. It might be something that you go a little bit smaller, sculpin pattern, something like that. That's just, in that little bit lower water. But there's fish are still eating on that. And then as we get into, low water, I kind of start the opposite way. I go start with the dry fly and see what's going to be, fish are spooky. They've been fished out all summer and, they might be holding in different areas. depending on what's going on. If you're there when the browns are spawning, that's in the late fall and skinny water, that's a different story. But always start with a dry fly, and you got those, you know, later in the year, depending on what the bugs are going, start with something pretty basic. If you get some overcast days, any sort of like BWO pattern, something like that, you can get. People tend to overthink it and throw these crazy patterns, but your standard parachute atoms is almost always the best thing to start with. And
Absolutely.
yeah, that you'll see some caddis come off midday or early in the morning sometimes, and so that's always good. But and then you kind of just have to match that. But oftentimes our bugs in the fall get a little bit smaller. You get your trichos coming off, you get things like that. So you might have to downsize a little bit, but you can also, as we get later in the fall and that water's still kind of skinny, you can get some aggressive fish towards that, into early winter or during the winter, even if you're fishing in the wintertime, where you can throw a streamer and get something to move on it. And then so you got to look at that, and then really we could go into this for 2 hours, and really talk about it, but that's what I would do. I mean, really looking at where you're at in terms of flows, time of year, but starting with figuring out how much water there is, and depth is always the biggest thing to look at if you're going to nymph or you're going to streamer fish. And then summer, if you want to go big and see if you can get something to rise at it. But a lot of times starting small and really just easing into it's the best way to go.
So one of the things that I heard there was worms, San Juan, stuff like that on high rod. And I've heard that on runoff a bunch because there are a lot of worms going in the water. I saw not too long ago, Michigan had a big flood, and somebody showed, I don't know if this is true because I saw it on the internet, so I got to be careful there, but they showed all the bugs that were washed into the Pierre Marquette, just probably millions of them, of worms washed into the Pierre Marquette. So that large, that runoff, that big water, that kind of thing does get the worms stirred up. And so I think that brings me to the next point, because I fish worms a little bit, and especially in late winter. But brings me to my next point is you mentioned pheasant tails, guy's choice, hare's ears, what else? Adams, parachute Adams. It's not exotic. The West is not exotic. It's if you start with what you fish with at home, you'll be in the ballpark.
Absolutely.
Unless you're fishing corn, and that would probably work too. But we tend to, I know the first time I went, I bought a bunch of flies, whole bunch of Western flies, which I still have today somewhere. There's a whole fly box of Western flies that I never take out there anymore. None. I take hare's ears, pheasant tails, some midges, all the stuff that I fished here. I kind of just throw stuff out of the guide boxes into my own fly box and take off. So I think if I get anything out of the answers to that question is don't go too far out of your box, out of your comfort zone when you head somewhere else. And this is true anywhere. Michigan, same way. Where Alabama, same way. Even for smallmouth, there's a lot of things down there that hold true that I do up here and we do up here. Kentucky, same way. Where else? Arkansas, lots of rivers over there. Start the same way. We often fish the same way there that we fish here, or really close to it. So, Michael, I'm glad that you went down that road and kind of backed up what I've been thinking for a while now.
Absolutely. I think, a big part of it is you're already in a new place. If you're coming out here to the West for the first time or you're fishing a river for the first time, you might as well be comfortable with what you're throwing. You might as well start there. And oftentimes, more often than not, presentation is more than as long as you're close on the hatch and your bugs look somewhat like, what those fish are used to seeing, they're going to eat it. If you can present it the right way and throw in new flies, or if this rig is heavier than you're used to or lighter than you're used to, whatever it is, that's going to throw you off more than what you're going to catch more fish on the flies that you're used to throwing, as long as they're close. Presentation is everything in that, in my opinion.
Agree. And we'll get probably into this a little bit more, but I also go for the type of water I like to fish most because, again, it's a comfort thing for me to get kind of up and running and get myself going. Because generally I don't have a ton of time. I want to come back and say yes. I want to answer that question. What did you catch? Well, I caught rainbow or browns or whatever. I don't want to come back and say, well, I got skunked.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
want to. I have definitely said that before, but yeah, it's about comfort. Don't forget to stop and look around because
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
definitely different out there than it is in most other places. Well, let's go ahead and kick this thing off from high atop the world headquarters of Southeastern Fly. This is the Southeastern Fly podcast. Thanks for joining us on this episode. Feel free to share this with your friends and your fishing partners. Hit the like and click the follow, as they say. Sign up for the Southeastern Fly newsletter and get a jump on upcoming events and episodes. That's going to be available wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. So, who is our guest on this episode about fly fishing the Rocky Mountain West? He's been a guide. He's worked as a biologist. He's also managed trophy water on the Blue River. He's the chief marketing officer and biologist just for Infinite Outdoors. You can find him at infiniteoutdoorsusa.com. His home water is the Yampa River in Colorado, as everybody probably knows. That's my favorite river ever. He's friends with some folks that have already been a guest on the podcast, all the way from Hayden, Colorado. Please welcome Michael Moroney to the Southeastern Fly Podcast. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
That was a good opening question, and we like to hit hard with the opening question. But boy, there's some things here that I think that our listeners who are thinking about taking some time out west are really going to find interesting because I want to get into some of the things that I've done out there and used Infinite Outdoors to do. So a couple of different times I've used y'all's services. It's a company that provides access to millions of acres of private ground, y'all. Hundreds of miles of private water. So if you fish or you hunt, either one, they have access to that for what I would consider a very nominal fee. Definitely worth a little bit of extra money. You're spending thousands of dollars to go out there. A little bit of extra money ain't going to kill you. I promise you. It will actually get you a lot of good results. And not only good results, I've had good results every time I've used them, but man, we have had some great water all to ourselves. Nobody in sight anywhere. I mean, anywhere, nowhere. Like we've been the only people out, not on the only on the river, but as far as you could see. It was really I can't say enough about it. But so they consult with the landowners that helps them kind of ensure we're getting a quality experience. They do it for fishing, hunting in 19 states, hundreds of properties. It's listed online. I've downloaded the app now. I've done that. There's a lot of great information on there. But so putting together what we're trying to do is get people ready to go out west, especially this summer. So with that in mind, Michael, it would be good for us to know how your program works before we venture into the rivers and get real technical into the fly fishing part of this. Can you give us an overview about how and help us understand how Infinite Outdoors works?
Yeah, absolutely. You covered it pretty well, but I'll kind of back it up. And yeah, our whole platform was designed to provide access in places that were previously inaccessible to everybody that wants a DIY, do-it-yourself adventure, whether you're fishing or you're hunting. What we do is we work with the landowner. They list their property for on our platform. We go out there, we figure out, okay, you have a mile of this river. We wanted to. You can offer X amount of fishing trips per week or per season, and we list that, and then we open up the calendar, and then people like yourself or whoever can jump onto our app or the website, and they can go out and book that property, invite their friends. When you reserve a property, like you mentioned, you're the only person that has access to that for the day. You and whomever guests you decide to invite. So it is exclusive access for those days. It gives you the ability to really try a bunch of different places. And as an angler, as someone that doesn't need a guide every time you want to go, sometimes that's always great. And but you're like, hey, I've been to this river before. Maybe I'm going to try it by myself, or this is a new spot. I want to go out and adventure. You can just go on there and you reserve it, and have that all to yourself. So that allows us to not only open up more properties and get more people out there, but like you mentioned, keep the prices affordable. Because you're really just paying, we're essentially a pass through for you to pay the landowner a trespass fee. That's kind of an easy way to look at it. We deal with all the back end stuff and the calendars and the management, and then you get to go out there and just book it and reserve it, and it works really well for you and for the landowner. They know who's there, and then they might come down and say hello, or you just wave at you as they go by in the tractor, the Ranger, and you keep on fishing, kind of thing. So really, it works really well for that. And like you mentioned on our app, we've integrated a bunch of features for people that are traveling or it's a new property they've never been to. We have full mapping features. You also, when you reserve a property, you get offline maps that are downloaded onto your app that show you where to park, what the boundaries are. We even have water flows for all our fishing properties that are up to date to the nearest gauge, so you can see that, at the time of booking or when you're going out there. So it's kind of all in one place. We have weather all on there, so there's a ton of stuff on there. But our whole idea is give you one app or one website that you can go and book a spot to go, and so you don't have to be on your phone all day. We want you to be out there and enjoy these beautiful places that most people wouldn't be able to get to unless you know somebody or you can afford to lease it for a whole year or things like that. This allows you to, be in at a lower price point, but then get to still see these really beautiful places and go fishing or go hunting. And yeah, we are across a lot of the US. We're started in Colorado. Currently, we are located, our offices in Wyoming. So we're kind of have a higher concentration of properties in the Rocky Mountain West. And yeah, we have a bunch of fishing stuff on there that, I'd say it gets used a lot, but it's never overused. We manage that so it's not booked, more than it can sustain. And then, yeah, there's some really great enough, as many properties as I haven't been able to fish all of them yet. So I'd like to, but still working down the list.
So that's another thing. So we started out with how do we get out there? What do we use when we get out there? But now you can put that information together with, all right, I've got a water flow. I've got the water flow, which let's face it, if I'm going on a trip 2 months from now, I'm watching the water flow like I'm going tomorrow. The weather you need when you get out there, and we start watching it a week or two ahead of time. And then put together with what you just told us on that opening question. And I think that puts a pretty good little package together. So the first time that I used y'all, it was here's a pin and here's some directions on written directions on how to get to the pin. And we passed the guy that owned it on the ranch, big ranch coming out. But I didn't see another. He was the only one I saw once we got off the main road. And I just think that it's just unique and it's good. And you don't have to have a guide to do it. Yeah, I guess you could if you wanted to. Yeah. I would recommend getting a guide for a day somewhere and pick their brain and let them know, okay, I'm going to this river, and tomorrow, the next, whatever, or this list of rivers, and then pick their brain as well. Get all the information you can get.
I think so. And I think out west, it's important if you get a guide to tell them that, they'll be able to spot pretty quick if depending on how everything, your knowledge base but I think a lot of guides, and in my experience, you get a variety of clients. You get out here that are just maybe out here on a family vacation and they're like, I want to try fly fishing, never done it before, But if you're going out there to fish and you're coming out here to fish and you're like, all right, I'm fishing for 4 days across Colorado or whatever. I'm gonna try all these different rivers or a week, and you get a guide at the start, be like, let them know, hey, yeah, I'm gonna go fish here, here. You ever fish that? What do you use? Or why are you setting in the rig up this way? Or what are we looking at here? What bugs are hatching? Because guides are on the water all day, and they can show that. And one nice thing about I didn't mention on the app is we have a pretty like substantial like review system when someone books a trip, and it shows you can go back and look at all the reviews just like you would a hotel or anything like that or an Airbnb. And that's a good resource as well to look at it and be like, oh, I'm going to be here in June. Last year this is the guy, these guys fished this in June. Here's what they caught. And our anglers are really good about leaving some pretty detailed reviews. And so, because they want everyone to enjoy it, and that's a big thing. Like hunters on the other side, they might be a little more territorial over their hunting spot, but anglers, I think, we tend to, if you're fishing public water, there's gonna be somebody right down the river, so you might as well, say hi and make a friend, and so anglers are the kind of the same way on our app to where they usually provide pretty good feedback on the reviews and everything.
Well, I'm going to do my best not to be a fanboy, okay? But no kidding, it really changed the way that I look at things out there. Like I said, I still hire guides. I mean, we had Mark Richardson on here the other just month or two or three ago, and just a great guy. So I still work with him. Don't get me wrong, but this is unique. So y'all have a lot of different opportunities available, and so let's start with. I want to start with some bigger rivers. So I've been fortunate enough to fish some bigger rivers out there. The Colorado and the Yampa are probably the bigger ones. And then last time we were out, we fished the Arkansas. But but understanding what we're getting into if we wanted to fish a larger property or a bigger body of water, I think that would be helpful to folks. So let's start with larger rivers. Give us an idea of what a larger river means on the app. And what are some of the larger rivers that you offer? And feel free to get super technical and nerdy on this too, if you can, on how to approach them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of break it down. So you look at like the larger rivers out west, and it varies. I'm a little biased towards, the Colorado, Wyoming area because that's where I fish the most. But in Colorado specifically, I look at the Colorado River as one of the bigger rivers because it's, most people float it, and it's floatable because of the reservoir system for a majority of the year or summer, anyways. So I look at that as a big one. You can get up into the, North Platte around Casper, or you can get all the way up into the Snake, outside of Jackson and into Idaho, things like that. I look at larger rivers as ones that are navigable by for a majority of the year. Most people would prefer to float them in a perfect world, or a lot of people choose to float them. But in my mind, and I go back and forth on other people about this, but I actually like to wade those properties because when you float over, it's beautiful. I love floating and it's gorgeous. You catch a lot of fish. You get to see fish from a different vantage point than wading. But what our platform and what kind of why I like it so much is the ability to wade these bigger rivers and kind of pick apart a riffle or pick apart some pocket water that's, would be rapids in a, if you're floating through, you're just going right over the top of them, and you're not even, you might pick your flies up for that little stretch, or you get a riffle section that you want to stop and fish that riffle because you might see a big shelf in the middle of it. And that's what I think of when I look at like larger rivers is the ability to, kind of slowly, meticulously pick apart these longer stretches of a riffle or flats or pocket water, rapids, things like that. So specifically on the Colorado River, we have a bunch of spots that are kind of in between these big takeouts that people use, and so you get to go out there and you get to say, okay, here's 100-yard riffle that I might get 5, 6 casts in, good drifts in on a boat, but I can go in and I can work it from the bottom to the top. There might be a really nice shelf at the top, and I can work laterally across that and see where those fish are sitting in that. You can check your depths. You can really like see if if those bugs are sitting higher or those fish are sitting high or low within that water column in those different riffles, and that's what I think is really fun about it. And then, throwing streamers or hoppers in pocket water or on a long riffle and getting more than one chance at it is really what's beneficial in that aspect. Because too many times do we only get one chance at this really nice hole, and then you got rowing for you, yelling at him to slow down, and he can't, or something like that, and then you're just on to the next. You got to have a short memory when you're floating, and when you get to wade, you can really work for it and pick across those things.
I think the wading opportunities, you get to know the water better. You just do, especially if you're only there for a certain amount of time. But I think that when you're floating those bigger rivers, I see it in our boat too, is somebody will see something, they'll fish it, they like it, and then they'll try to fish it again. And the next thing you know, they're fishing 20 yards behind them, especially the person in the back. And then it takes 10 minutes to get them turned back around. and focus because they're really thinking, wow, that was really good back there, or it looked really good. I
Yeah.
noticed that the other day that the guy was fished out of the back of the boat quite a bit because we'd passed something and I would see him kind of get fixated on it. It's like, oh, here we go. He's going to be fishing behind it. And he caught some fish out of it.
Yeah.
He's a good stick, but the next section might be, like you said, it may be that I'm coming to in a boat might be kind of dull, flat, whatever. So I like waiting sometimes. I don't like to wait too much, but I like waiting sometimes because I really get to know whatever that stretch is.
Yeah. And I think it's different out here because it might, I mean, I haven't fished a ton out where you're at, but our banks are not usually too, you can usually, they're pretty accessible, and the rivers, as long as we're not wading during high water, you can still, even on those big rivers, you can find a place to get out in the middle of the channel or you can work across or you might be wading a little deep, but you can still do it, and there's some surprising, there's spots on the Colorado River I've waded a bunch of times that you get, you know, 30 boats pass by every day and you're catching fish in spots they don't even think about casting because there's those variations in the middle of a riffle or just little depth changes that you find fish at and you can kind of or there might be fish rising in a section that would be really hard to see from a boat and you get to go walk over and try those.
And it's about access, and there's not 10 people standing in that same riffle
Exactly.
2 hours before.
You're the only one that day and you get to get out there and really like I think it's how you learn a lot about how to fish and how those fish are sitting in that river because you're not limited to that one cast on that riffle. You can change up your depth or bugs or and work it.
Exactly. So I've also been out there and fished a couple of medium rivers. So the Arkansas, I think there's a lot of places in the Arkansas that I would consider a medium-sized river, and still can get a boat down it, but it can get a little tight from time to time. The South Platte, in some places, I fished it with y'all, and it was it's small where we fished it, so it was up toward. Kind of up on the not on the side of the mountain, but right at the base, and it just wasn't very big, very wide. Like I couldn't jump across it, but I probably could have when I was a little younger. And then, so those two, you know, the Dream Stream is kind of medium. It's pretty packed. 11 Mile, pretty packed, but still I consider so that size. So probably about the size of a 2 lanes on an interstate highway is kind of the way that I think of it at its skinniest point.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that that's like the Yampa is, where I fish the most, and that's how I see it. You can float it at high water, but the majority of the fishing is done wading, or South Platte. If you could float it, like in some of those areas, you could technically get a boat down it, but a good caster, you could probably cast all the way to the far bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's that medium size, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. So again, let's get a little. How do you approach the medium-sized rivers? Is there something different you do there? And let's still talk to the wading angler there.
Yeah, I think it really, we keep harping on this time of year and what everything you're going to do because I think it's so key on what's happening. There's less, fish are in those medium rivers, there's less room for kind of like exploring, I would say, like I do in a big river where you can, this riffle might be really long and you can just kind of like you bump that fish, there's more holding right above you. You might have a smaller pocket. It still could be 15, 20, 30 yards long, maybe, but it's going to be, you got to methodically like work bottom to top on some of these, specifically on a lot of these kind of structures. And some of them, we have a mix of properties, especially in, Colorado, Wyoming has some too that have been, they might have some work done on them where they got different, they have a riffle structure, they got a big J hook or a big plunge pool, something like that. So you can kind of pick those out looking for smaller features and really how you read the water in that. And I think that that's kind of where you get on that the middle sized river compared to big or even small, where you're really trying to read these little features, a little bit in small too, but the features just get smaller and you're kind of picking out, okay, this time of year, I think, lower water, maybe those fish are pushed up against this top of this riffle, or, higher flow, we're going to look for the inside bends on these, and you're fishing more of those inside bends as you move up. And then, or, middle, like normal flows, fish might be spread out, or there's a hatch coming on, so they're going to be pushed up into the, where those bugs are coming off and things like that. I think it's just really the approach of how you think about that water when you get to it and take a second, not only look around because you're probably in a beautiful place, but look at the water for a second. And you don't necessarily need to see fish rising or see fish in the water to really think about where they're going to be. But you have to be careful a little bit on how you approach that when you're waiting, because you can't just run right in there to the middle of the stream and start casting, to the far bank. I think people often overlook those fish that are on on the inside corners of these smaller rivers. Um, and so that's what I always harp on is just like, let's start close to us, let's see what's here, and then let's work out or let's work across or up or whatever it is. So looking at that medium-sized river, you know, there could be some boulder features, there could be riffles, there could be slow pools that they may not be creating these rapids like in these bigger, like this pocket water necessarily, like you would in a big river, but they're creating that in a different way where there you have, like I call it soft structure. Someone told me that one time, and I think it sticks to where you have your hard structure, which is your rocks or your whatever logs, something like that. But the soft structure is that water that's falling off of those features. And so it moves a little bit depending on flow and everything like that. But that's what those fish are really looking for is that soft feature, and I always think trout, whether it's here or anywhere, are somewhat lazy. So they're gonna sit in the slow water and feed in the faster water most of the time, unless they really got to get up there in that faster water for some reason. Um, so looking at those little changes and I love that part of it. I love being able to pick it apart and see, and look at that little variation and that small riffle that comes across here and say, oh, there's a low spot in the middle of that. And that's why those fish are sitting right there. So in those medium rivers, that's what I kind of look at.
Every river features a problem waiting to be solved, is really all it is, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And depth too is huge, like in your rig setup is figuring out, if you're fishing nymphs or if you're fishing streamers, am I getting down deep enough? Or am I too deep in some of these spots? And the small rivers do have, or medium-sized rivers rather, do have, they can carry a lot of depth to them, surprisingly, but it changes quickly. So you might have to get down really fast. And then, otherwise in that hole is shorter. So picking your bug selection or your weight, kind of selection, if you're nymphing, if you're throwing streamers, I always go bigger than smaller to start anyways, and if that doesn't work, then mix it up. But, you know, looking at that and then, dries you can throw anywhere. But the weight is a little harder to figure out in those medium sized ones.
Yeah, yeah, you don't have as long a time to use it either. Because if you're on the move, it's going to be you need to be able to switch out things quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point too, and that's kind of like what we look at in properties out here is some of the big rivers, say the Colorado River, you don't really need as much linear footage of water to get access to fish it effectively because you can fish the same riffle for 2 hours and you might have only moved 20 yards kind of thing, and but on the medium size and small size rivers you want to be able to cover some ground and see different things. So those are typically a little longer. You might have a 3/4 or a mile or 2 miles of water to yourself because you're going to end up, walking a little bit. You're not spending as much time at each spot. Most of the time, you're kind of covering ground and seeing what's around each next corner.
What about still on medium rivers? Small rivers as well, but let's just take with medium rivers. Is it to me? It's good to see something and fish it a little bit, and then come back and see it a second time with maybe a lunch in between to really think about what happened. Is that a strategy maybe somebody would want to incorporate if possible?
Yeah, I like to do it in a way where I look at streamer fishing as a way you're kind of just disrupting everything. You're going into the bedroom and you're tearing everything apart. You're making a mess in there. So typically I'll go, depending on how many rods you're going to bring with you, but maybe you only have one and you're going light and you're just like, you know what, I'm comfortable switching quickly. And you might start on those smaller, medium, small rivers where you might start dry fly fishing or you start nymphing in the morning, you're waiting for a hatch, you come up and then you get a little hatch midday or mid-morning, um, switch over to dries as you're moving up the river. Well, then like as you switch methods, in my opinion, you're kind of leaving a whole group of fish untouched, or that one fish for a streamer untouched that might chase a big streamer. So if I know that, and it's the beauty of having a property all to yourself, is like I can dry fly fish or nymph all the way up this section of river, and I haven't even touched any of those big fish that might chase a streamer or those aggressive fish that might chase a streamer. So I like to, you can fish streamers a number of different ways out here, but I like to fish them, from upstream most of the time, or laterally. And so what I'll do is work my way up from the bottom up, and then, all right, I'm going back for lunch, I'm halfway up, whatever, I'm going to walk back. I might as well throw on a streamer and walk back through the edge of some of these holes and fish a streamer, and usually tag a couple that something that you're like, man, I fished that hole for 30 minutes and I didn't touch a fish on a dry or on a nymph or a dry, and then you throw a streamer through there and here they come.
I think that's a good way to do it for sure. Because you're right, disruption is a good way to put a. You're throwing something right in the mix. I mean, you fixed it's like a hand grenade in there of
Yeah.
making them all mad.
Be ready. Be ready on the first cast too. I always tell people, like, when I was guiding, I would never show people how to streamer fish in a new hole because it's always the first cast,
Yeah,
and you never want to be that. I never wanted to be that guy that'd be like, they're like, can you show me how to do it? I'm like, no, you just figure it out. Or walk down into the flat water where I know there's no fish. We just walk through it. I'll throw in there.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Well, isn't that the truth? You're right.
yeah,
So I guess I've spent a lot of time out west because, like, some of the streams I love South Park, so I just use it. Won't go into much of the others, but Tarryall Creek, I fished it with y'all. It's in West Jefferson, Colorado. I like Boulder Creek. I don't know if y'all have anything there or not. I
we do.
fished.
Yep.
Do you? Okay, I did the public water there. The Upper Colorado in the park, I like it, and we've got a good rhythm going now. So let's stick with that, but let's move on to small streams and what you would do there. And then I'll tell about my day and give some hints too on what we did.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they got a soft spot in my heart, these small streams, because I think, a lot of us that grew up out west, or at least me personally, like, it's how you kind of cut your teeth in the fly fishing world. You're a little kid, or what's a place you can go and you don't care how big of a fish you catch, you just want to catch something, and you go fish these smaller streams that have maybe a higher, fish per mile, or thing like that. You got brook trout, you got some browns that live in there, you get your rainbows. And it's a lot of fun. I think you be prepared to, cover some ground, in my opinion. You're not spending much time at all on each spot. You're walking while you're casting a lot of times, depending on how big of a river it is. We have some properties that the river might be only 5 feet wide in some spots, but you can go, it's 4 miles of river, so you can go catch 40 fish in a day, all on the same dry fly until it falls apart, kind of thing. So I love that kind of fishing. I think, we sometimes it's a little tactical. You're getting in the willows, or you're trying to figure out, how do I cast to this spot, or drifting way downstream at something just because there's no spot to cast at it. But then other times you're in the wide open and you're just kind of walking and trying to not be seen, but you're staying behind the fish and just casting. And fish will surprise you. They come out of spots that you would never expect. I think the same deal, like, everyone shoots for these, like, oh, there's a bend with a deep hole, there's got to be a fish living there, and you're right, there's always 1 to 10 fish living there. But it's kind of fun. You get these long straightaways of some riffle water that looks like, there's nothing in there. I walk by that 10 times out of 10, and but there might be one little bush hanging over, or one little section of where that, the stream is most prominent, and there's probably going to be a fish in there. It might not be big, but there's going to be something in there. And throwing a hopper over their head, or a hopper dropper or something like that is the way to go, in my opinion. And that's really like what I look at is, all right, I'm going to be agile, ready to move. I'm gonna probably go lighter, 3, 4 weight, something I'm very comfortable casting. And unless South Park's often pretty windy, so you got to look for that. But you just got to fight through that sometimes. But yeah, just like being able to cover water. I always go with those fish are pretty
Opportunistic.
yeah, opportunistic. That's the word. Yeah, and so you don't have to get crazy with your tippet sizes. Like, I go heavy because if I get stuck on that branch across the river, I want to break the branch off, not break my fly off and ruin the hole. So I'll
Exactly.
just, I'm fine with fishing 2 or 3X, honestly. And and going big and something again, like we talked about at the very beginning, something you're comfortable with. You don't need to go crazy and fish some little thing that you heard about. You can fish a stimulator, you can fish a hopper, chubby Chernobyl, caddis is going to work every time. Most of these rivers have caddis in them, and so something you're comfortable casting and you know is going to float. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to be yeah, like I oftentimes don't even bring a vest when I go fish these small streams. I'll have a fly box in my pocket that's got some dries that I like, a little extra tippet, and some floating, and just go for a walk, enjoy it.
Well, that's so true. It's a great way to fish too, because you're there's really no constraint to it. So we fished a place called Tarryall. It was a ranch out there. I mean, it was a big ranch near Jefferson. And like I said, we they gave us the pen. We drove out there with some directions. We get to the place and we ended up doing some things exactly like I said you don't have to do in the beginning of we tried so I tried some things. Small stream been forever since I've been on a small stream and never one like that. My small streams were in the Smokies, so it was high gradient. This was lower gradient, real curvy through a meadow where cows were. You had to watch where you stepped because there was some cow left their cow paws behind, and which is fine. And we just started kind of fishing and we didn't do real good in the morning. And I said, not until we put on a hopper. And then we started doing really good, like getting some things. But then it was lunchtime. So we went back, had some chairs, pulled them out, sat around at the truck. Like I said, nobody there. We ate our sandwiches and just sat, shot the bull for, I don't know, probably a little more than an hour. Which I felt like we were kind of on a time crunch getting there in the first hour or two, but we had enough fish where I felt confident. All right, we're going to catch some more fish. And so we sat there, just looked around, we talked, we caught up, and then we went back to fishing. And when we went back to fishing, like you had said, fish come from places that you really don't expect it. And I think this is a testament to no one being there for like a week before we were, at least, because I looked at the app to see what was what was taken and what wasn't. But for instance, we caught all browns, and I saw one really good rainbow. And the browns weren't huge, they weren't 20 inches or anything, but still, it was fun. But one of the browns I threw in against the left bank. I was standing on the left bank. I threw up the left bank, and when the fly hit the water, a brown, probably 12 inches or so, came from the right bank out of a pool, crossed a gravel bar. His back came out of the water, and he smashed the fly on the left bank. I'm sure the people in Denver heard me just laughing because it was super cool. Lots of little things like that that looking back, I'm like, it was a special day. I mean, it really was. We caught a bunch of fish after we got dialed in, had a couple beers while we were there at lunch and, relaxed even more, slowed the day down more is what we really did. That's really what lunch did. Oh, and while we were traveling there, I don't remember. I don't think we needed something. I can't remember what it was, a drink or something like that for lunch. So on the way there, we stopped in Jefferson and we stopped in a place that had fudge and we loaded up on fudge too. So, I mean, just, a lot of things fell together that day. I'm a big fan of good fudge too. So that helped. But yeah, so little things like that really, really made the day. But, the fish, like you said, there was a riffle where there was a hole kind of in the middle that seemed a little deeper because there's a little slicker on top. There's a nicer fish in there. And, there might have been a tree sticking over there. But no, there weren't any trees at that section. So really need to fish it all.
You do. And especially I mean, it goes for, I think, all the rivers. It doesn't matter what size they are. I mean, if you've got high water, you're obviously not going to fish every spot, but especially the medium and smaller rivers and smaller ones in particular, you're better off walking with the fly in the water, just casting. You're going to turn something up or you're going to surprise yourself. And the other thing I'll do is I'll walk up if I fish a spot and I'm like, man, I thought there'd be a fish in that riffle. Sometimes I'll walk right through it afterwards, just to see. It might not scare any fish out, but you look at it, you think about, okay, why is there not something there? And then you go walk through it, and or why was there a fish there? And maybe you caught it and displaced it. It's downriver now. I'm gonna go walk through it, and you'd be like, oh, that was, like you said, that went from ankle deep to knee deep right there, and I didn't even notice it. Or it doesn't even have to be that drastic. It could be, it's 6 inches deeper. So you learn a lot when you do that, and you have the ability to walk through those. And I'm not advocating for tromping all over the river afterwards, but there's times where it's okay. I'm gonna go. I know there's nothing in there, or fish are pretty resilient. They'll come back to their spot if they want to. But yeah, I think that there's a lot to be learned, and it's also just like those small rivers are such beautiful places. Sometimes you see moose, you see elk around. It's just a cool spot. It's usually a pretty good backdrop, and just to have that experience with you and your buddies, and man, we started way down there and we caught 40 fish by the time we came up here, and I haven't changed my fly one time,
Right. Right.
So but you mentioned like the morning, and that kind of brings up a lot of those higher mountain, like smaller rivers. And depending on what time of year, obviously if you're in July, August, and it's hot, going to be warm out, you want to get there a little earlier because watch the water temp. But oftentimes, if you're fishing higher streams, they're not gonna, if it's colder, June or early July, they might not be real active on like early in the morning. So it's not always that necessary to get there right away. I can think of some small streams I used to fish all the time that, we'd get out there early and be like, all right, well, I'm gonna throw a dry or a hopper dropper, and you might tag one, two here or there, but then as soon as that sun angle gets up higher in the sky and starts warming that up, you start hearing the hoppers clicking around next to you when you're walking through the grass, and that's when it really turns on and those fish are looking up.
We were there in October and it was cool in the morning,
Yep. Yeah, or that time
but
exactly.
it was fantastic after lunch or about lunch.
Yeah, I mean, colder water temp, they're waiting for that sun angle, and once they do though, it's pretty fun.
Yeah. We're gonna blame my lack of fish in the morning to that right there.
There you go. Yeah, it's not you.
No, it's not me. It's them. Okay.
Yeah.
See, I feel much
Yeah.
better now
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for, David.
All good information, every bit of it. But so I think this is probably the question. This is not probably anything. This is the question that I get the most comments on, and especially in these cases, it's part of the trip. And we like to eat and have the need for a real good experience when we go somewhere, especially on a longer trip like that. You cover a vast area, and I understand that, but Michael, give us an idea of the good places to eat around the rivers that you fish and why you recommend those places.
One that stands out, as you mentioned, live up outside a steamboat, and it's where I've, fished the most and used to guide and everything like that. And it's moved around a lot, but it's now located right on the Yampa River in Steamboat. It's called Taco Cabo, and it's kind of a little taco joint that I don't know if you're familiar with it or have been in there, but they have well, they got great drinks. You could, in the summertime, you sit out on the patio and watch, especially in the evening, watch all the caddis bounce off the water on the Yampa, and people are fishing up and down the river right there. So it's a cool atmosphere, and they have great food. They have a torta sandwich. It's a pork belly torta that I rank it right up there as one of the best sandwiches. It's from a taco shop, so it sounds weird, but they make their own bread. It's really good. So that would be one if you're in the Steamboat area and you're going to fishing. It hits the spot after a day on the water, a beer or a margarita, and that is pretty solid. So that's one that I always end up at, it seems like, after a day on the water and if I want to sit outside. And actually, not to be outdone, is there's a little dive bar right next door that is known for just being a dive bar, but they're a Louisiana place, and they sell they have a shrimp po' boy that's really good. They got a bunch of little sandwiches that are actually pretty solid. That's right next door. So there's a few options there.
Have you been up into Jackson or up in that area at all?
Yeah. So I fished a lot of like the central southern Wyoming side of things. I fished the Green up by Jackson. Kind of an underrated river or underrated section of the Green that I really like is below Fontenelle Reservoir. It's north of Green River, so you have kind of the Green flows out of the Wind River Range through Pinedale and then down, and it's like a if you're driving it looks just like there's nothing there. It's sagebrush flats as far as you can see, but the Green River cuts through the middle of there and flows into Fontenelle Reservoir, and then from the Fontenelle, the dam at the Fontenelle, I believe it's like 41 miles of a national wildlife sanctuary refuge or whatever you call it. From there all the way to the town of Green River, and then from Green River it goes into Flaming Gorge, and then you get like the famous Green River A, B, C section. Um, but that section of the Fontenelle right below the dam, the first, I want to say 5 or 6, you can float the whole thing, but the first few miles of it are the best. And you can wade fish the top couple miles. And I've had some pretty incredible days there where first thing in the morning you might be fishing PMDs, and then it switches to yellow sallies, and then you're catching fish on the surface on one bug, and then they stop hitting it and you look around for a second, you're like, oh, that's because whatever, blue wings are coming off now, and then you switch, you start catching fish on that, and then the yellow sallies, and then the caddis come off, and it's a cool place, and it gets some people are starting to find out about it, but years ago you would never find anyone there. But it's a neat spot.
Is it close to a town or anything? Or
Not really. It's 30 minutes from Green River, the town of Green River.
oh, okay, okay.
So, I mean, we always there's camping spots all over up there. So it's a pretty cool place to go camp and, set up a tent and have beers with your buddies and just get away from everybody for a little while.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of down in a like Sage Flats, and then it's down in this old river valley. So you wouldn't think it, but there's cottonwoods, and you're kind of out of can get windy, but you're kind of out of that real strong Wyoming wind because you're kind of in this little river bottom.
Gotcha. And that's one thing about that area. Everywhere out there is you're prone to have some wind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the Jackson area is beautiful, and the Snake, or all those up there, Yellowstone, all that is pretty neat.
Y'all have properties up in that area?
We do on we have some stuff in like the Thermopolis area on the Wind River, and that's really cool. The Wind River, you can fish some spots we have that are outside the reservation, then you can fish the reservation land, as long as you get your reservation permit and all that, but great fishing there. And then we have stuff on the other side, in the Idaho side on the Snake, and some of those smaller creeks over there.
There's some good fishing over in Idaho, where in that area that a lot of people, I go to Jackson instead or something else.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
All that, the Gray and all those rivers over there, and I think it's the Slate River, but I've fished those. That's one spot you do want to have the right flies. Like when those pink PMDs come off on the Snake River, you got to have the pink PMDs. Other than that, you can get away with most other things. But
No kidding.
yeah,
I don't even know if I've ever heard that.
yeah, they have I believe it's on the Snake, like kind of towards Idaho Falls. And they'll get these PMDs, and the only ones that the fish will eat, you know, they're pink.
Huh.
They have pink body on them. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. More of that one, it's big river there, so it's more of a floating river, but it's pretty fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got pork bellies, tacos, a dive bar with po' boys, which are fantastic. But I want to move on to all these rivers that we've talked about today so far. Tell us about the one that got away.
I think I got to go back to the river I was just talking about, the Fontenelle. I spent this was some years ago. I spent a long weekend up there with some buddies. We camped and fished all up and down the river, and we were kind of midday one day. We were fishing like right across from the boat ramp, or right at the boat ramp rather, and right below the dam. So water's real turbulent coming out of the water, kind of just coming out of the spillway, and there's no structure or anything. You can tell it was carved out for what they needed, how much water they needed to flow out and everything. And we were more or less about to go back, and I think go back and have lunch or have the beer in the afternoon. I forget exactly what time it was. And I had on a big gold chubby Chernobyl, and I was just more talking to a buddy of mine, and we were just like at the very top before all the water, the back eddy of the spillway. And I threw this big hopper out in the middle of this nasty water, just cast into cast. And this brown that I've never seen, a wild brown the size of that thing, came up and ate ate my hopper just like it was nothing, and took it back down to the bottom of of this really nasty water, and just kind of sat there. And my buddy was 30 yards downstream, and I just was like yelled at him like, you got to get up here. And it's one of those that right away when he came up, I mean, when I was working on the blue, I caught some really big fish because we had really big fish there that were stocked, and this thing was just as big as some of the, it was massive, and not only long but just thick around. And on a 5 weight, I wasn't ready to, I couldn't even move the thing. He went right down, and here, feel some head shakes. He came up once, and you're always thinking like, I got this guy on probably 4X and faster water. Like if he takes off, I'm in trouble. And yeah, and then he went back down, and my buddy ran up with the net. We're trying to figure it out, and then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, my fly just went over the top of my head. Didn't even, like a little head shake. Didn't go on a run. Didn't do anything. He knew what he's doing, and he rolled, spit my fly out. And I'm not ashamed to say that I spiked my fly rod on the edge of the bank right there. And the only time I've ever done that, and just threw it right into the water, and I just like said something I don't remember, but all I know is that my buddy that was downriver a couple hundred yards at camp was like, "What were you yelling about up there?" And I was like, "I don't want to talk about it." And to this day, I never forget when that fish came up and ate my hopper, and then the one time it came up and thrashed, and the buddy I was with that walked up, he just like his eyes got real wide, and I was like, "I know, I told you, he's huge." So he got away, and but it's those ones, I've caught a lot of fish that I remember, but that one I remember every little part of it because you always remember those a little bit better, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely. When you catch them, they're like, yeah, I caught it. Okay. But when they
yeah,
get away, it eats at me,
it
for
does.
sure. It's
Yeah,
still, I've got one from, I bet it's 15 years ago that still eats at me. So I totally get it.
yeah, but it's all in good fun, keeps you coming back.
It does. I bet you won't pass that pool without fishing it again, will you?
I've gone to it every time and thrown a hopper just to see what was there, and never got another eat in that hole.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow, that's a ton of information. We flew through that too, or time. No, time flew. Yeah, it's later than I thought it was. So yeah, good information, dude. Just I like these that I've done something that I can go back to and like if I interview a guide, if I fish with them before, the conversation seems to flow a little better. I think using y'all's service helps me to understand and makes the conversation to me flow a little better. I hope somebody's not going out there going, I don't know what the heck David's talking about. I don't think they are, but if you need to know more, I'll be happy to tell. Hopefully I didn't fanboy out on everybody and just try to sell it for you. But I think it's a neat special thing that y'all have going, for sure. So
Yeah, it's cool. It's fun to, provide that opportunity for people to go out and, whether they live in Colorado and they just want a place to get away from everyone, or they're traveling from somewhere else, or, they're going to Montana and they're like, yeah, I really would like to go fish this river. And, or, you know, it's a way to learn, it's a way to see new places. And oftentimes like the landowners are really grateful for the people that show up too. And so there's a cool dynamic there that often gets overlooked, that they like having people out. There's a reason they have their place listed with us, is they like having people out there. They know it's a special place and they want people to enjoy it. So that's a cool part of it as well.
and ranching is hard to make a living at a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so a little bit of extra income is definitely you're helping. Usually, you're helping the little guy
Yeah.
a little bit more, which is important too.
Yeah. And it's cool when a lot of times, the landowners will come down, they're working, and they're driving, whatever, and they'll come say hello. And I like those conversations, not, I know a lot of them, but, even if I'm with somebody new, and just to, they're like, all right, have fun, enjoy it. And then you're on the rest of the day. But it connects you a little bit with like what you're doing, and shows that, there's people that live there too. And this is, you're helping them, but you're also, they're helping you by giving you access to it.
Absolutely, it's good. Like I said at the beginning, it's good for everybody. I think we may just change the name of this show to DIY the West or something
Yeah,
like
there
that.
you go.
That's because that's really what it's turned out to be. But yeah, good, all good information. Well, let's go ahead and close this thing out. Thanks for joining us on the episode. Feel free to share it with your friends and your fishing partners. Hit the like and click the follow. Sign up for the Southeastern Fly newsletter, and it's available anywhere you're listening right now. When you get a chance, give us a positive review on wherever you're listening to this podcast. So, who was our guest about DIY the West? He's a former guide. He's been a biologist. He's also managed trophy water on the Blue River in Colorado. He's chief marketing officer and a biologist for Infinite Outdoors. You can find him at infiniteoutdoorsusa.com. He calls my favorite river the Yampa home. Michael Moroney, I appreciate you stopping by and appreciate all the information you've shared. Really, I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
You just listened to Michael Moroney, DIY the West on Southeastern Fly. See you next time.